Hey everyone, welcome back to Tech Talk. I'm Julia Beauchamp. I am here with CSO contributor Maria Korolov, as well as CSO senior editor Michael Nadeau, and we are going to be talking about CCPA, which is a new California privacy law, what that's going to mean for businesses and consumers alike, so stick around. All right, thank you guys all so much for coming in. Really appreciate you guys making the trek in.
Well, thank you for having me.
So I want to know a little bit, Maria, what is CCPA? Because what it's not is GDPR.
Right. So GDPR is European. CCPA is California.
Mm-hmm.
GDPR can result in billions of fines for companies that violate the privacy of people in Europe. California can result in huge fines for companies that violate the privacy of people in California. Since almost everybody has users or customers in California,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty much everyone has users and customers somewhere in Europe, it covers every single company of any significant size.
Between the two of them.
Yeah, but fortunately, if you're already all caught up on GDPR, you're most of the way there to California too.
So yeah, can you tell me a little bit about the specifics of CCPA and also just what it stands for? Because it's California something Privacy Act.
Consumer Privacy Act, yes. So the California Act, one of the biggest differences of companies is that it's not just regulators that can go after you for money. Individual people in California can sue you. You don't even have to have a breach. You can just be violating their privacy, showing them an ad they didn't want to see without their permission. They can sue you. You can get charged for up to $750 per violation. You can get class action lawsuits by people in California. And I don't know if you've heard this, but people in California like to sue.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, this was brand new information. But yeah, so you're not just having to deal with federal or state prosecutors and attorney generals. You're having to deal with every lawyer in California right now has little dollar signs going off in their head, thinking, who are they going to sue first?
Yeah, and I think, so when does this law actually go into effect?
So the law goes into effect at the beginning of 2020.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that you're going to get slapped with lawsuits on the first day.
Hopefully.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
People, when they notice violations, they could submit a complaint. You have 45 days to respond to the complaint. You can make a good faith effort. You can drag this out for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But after a certain point, things start happening. All those details are going to be worked out in practice. They literally wrote the law in 1 week. So there's a lot of stuff in there that they're having to work out as they go, and we're going to probably be seeing a lot of changes after the law goes into effect.
Okay. And this is what I think is really interesting about this law, which is, it affects pretty much every single company, because if you are a tech company, if you are online, you probably have a customer or a consumer or a user in California.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really interesting. So how are companies gearing up to become compliant? Because this is something that's going to affect almost all of them.
So if you're a smaller company, and this law goes down to companies with, I think, 25 million in annual revenues,
Okay.
This might change. So, don't take it for like gospel, because like all of the details are subject to change.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you have 50,000 user records, if you are a processor, so if you're doing stuff with this information, the criteria are lower.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have that, hopefully your vendor that's providing your infrastructure for you will take care of this for you. And if they're not, you should be looking for a new vendor right now and trying to figure this out. If you're handling your own data management infrastructure, then you need to be going through with a probably very expensive consultant to try to figure out how much information you need to be collecting, how much information you should be deleting at a furious pace, what business partners you should be dropping like a hot potato. All of this stuff is, you've got a lot of work to do.
And so there's obviously a lot of work to do, and this is slightly different from the prep that a lot of companies went Forward doing when they were prepping for GDPR. So, and Michael, this might be a question for you. If my company, my hypothetical company, is GDPR compliant, does that mean it's CCPA compliant, or what additional steps are companies needing to take?
You're a lot of the way there. One of the big differences between GDPR and the CCPA is that the CCPA has a much more detailed definition of what is personally identifiable information on a consumer. So you're going to need to know what that data is. For example, I think geolocation data is in the CCPA.
Olfactory data.
Olfactory data. Well, anything associated with biometrics, authentication.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Your history of using a website.
Yeah.
Like, if I have a website and I track what people do on this website, that's private information now.
Okay. That's really interesting. So there's going to be a lot of overhaul necessary. It's not just going to be as easy as saying, I'm GDPR compliant, so I'm pretty much already covered.
Now, the other thing that you have to do is the relationships with business partners. And this is going to be a really major one, because all the privacy activists in California, and there are some privacy activists in California, are going to be suing to get information about who their data was shared with. So you have to be able to tell John Schmo from California, for the past year, where has their information gone to other third parties? And this information will become public. Your entire data sharing structure, which until now has been pretty private, we're going to have a Cambridge Analytica scandal potentially for everybody.
It's really, that's a lot have to be able to do retroactively. I mean, I think depending on the company, it could be it could reveal some information that would not put some companies in a good light, but that's just obviously speculation. I don't know for sure.
That would never happen.
So similar to the prep leading up to GDPR, a lot of resources at various enterprises were dedicated to preparing for GDPR. How is preparation for CCPA affecting security budgets, affecting security resources?
So one of the things that will protect you against some of the lawsuits is having adequate security protections in place. So if you don't have the protections in place and the people suing you can show this, the fines can rack up really quickly. So there's best practices out there that a lot of people are recommending them. Again, this is all going to shake up in the courts, exactly what constitutes adequate protections and what doesn't. But it's a good practice at this point to look over and see if you're following the best standards that are available right now. And if you're not, make a plan to address them, because this is not legal advice in any way, shape, or form. But if you can show that you're moving towards compliance, that really looks good in the court of both legal courts and in the court of public opinion.
Right. If you're following a framework like NIST or CIT, and you've shown that you've gone through and chosen particular controls to protect this data, and that you've tested them, then you're going to be in pretty good shape. And in terms of, to answer your original question, there was recently a survey done by IDG. I believe it was of UK companies, but they asked a bunch of senior security and IT people how has the view of security changed in the boardroom, and 78% of them said GDPR has had a positive effect with how the corporate boards view security now. So that's a big plus in terms of getting support for security. Understood.
It's now seen as being compliant with privacy laws is seen as one of the most important. It's seen as a priority.
Right.
That's obviously very important. And so what I want to know too is, so we've already gone a little bit over what it means for enterprises, but if we can just touch a little bit on what that's going to mean for consumers. I'm suddenly going to be able to go, or maybe I'm not. If I'm not a resident of California, am I able to go ask Twitter all of the data that they've collected on me and over the past year?
Okay, so we can talk about the issue of segregating customers.
Sure.
So California people have the right to request their information for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I, as a company, have a choice. I can set up one system for California, one system for everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
and maintain two separate system of customer records.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping in mind that other states are in the process of following suit. So
Sure.
we're going to have this huge nightmare. Or I can say, I'm moving everybody over to the new system. A lot of companies are just going to say, we're going to have the best possible privacy policies for everybody. We're not going to discriminate about our users. And so the same way that you're going to get the GDPR compliance messages, even if you're not in Europe, you will be getting the California law privacy messages, even if you're not in California, from probably most of the big tech players out there, because it makes them look good and because it's cheaper.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. So even though I'm not a California resident, it's very possible that these big companies will just classify me as a user who could potentially access their system in California.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. That is very, this seems like it's going to be a lot of work to overhaul. It's a lot. It's a lot of people. In fact, over a couple billion in the world. So, you touched on this a little bit as well. So, will CCPA be a model for other states? And even going further, do you think this could be a model for U.S. federal law?
Yes and yes. So several other states are in the process of rolling out similar laws. I think Washington already has a CCPA light version out. I think Nevada has something in the works. New York has some laws focusing on the financial industry, but still a lot of overlap.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an ACLU survey earlier this year. 90% of residents in California wanted the stronger privacy laws.
Okay.
So even if residents of other states are a little bit behind California in wanting privacy, and I would not speculate that they are, it's something that everybody wants, this is what's going to happen.
Okay.
How fast it will go, legislation moves slowly. There's stuff happening at the federal level with the Sharpies that will slow down the process, so we might not see it on the federal level for quite a while. We still don't have a federal breach notification law, even though everybody wants one,
Right.
because the states have had individual breach notification laws for years now. So we don't expect the federal government to come in and clean this mess right away. Hopefully, it will, but
I think this goes back to what you were saying earlier, that they wrote the CCPA law in a week.
Mm-hmm.
They have amended it, but people view it as a work in progress. So before I think all the states and people in the federal government are looking at this,
Sure.
but they want to see how this plays out.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing at the federal level is that what I've spoken to some lawyers in D.C. who have said that there is bipartisan support for this sort of thing in Congress, but sometimes it's a matter of who owns it and which agency owns it. And
Gotcha.
then you get into turf wars and that sort of thing.
Sure. So what do you mean by which agency owns? Do you mean
Well,
like FTC versus FCC?
Right, exactly.
Okay. And that actually, Michael, ties in very nicely with the next point that I was trying to make, which is there's what we do have on the federal level is the FTC fining tech companies. I mean, it just happened. The FTC just issued a fine to Google for YouTube for violating children's privacy, so kids under the age of 13. And that was a $170 million fine, which, frankly, when you consider how much revenue Google brings in, is I can't do the quick math in my head, but I would not that much. Not that much. $170 million divided by, I think their revenue last quarter was
Cost of doing business.
yeah, exactly. Possibly a rounding error. So they aren't huge fines. So I'm a little bit curious how actually enforcing these laws will go over. I mean, the FTC can, and it's not that this wasn't a record-breaking fine. I think it was a record-breaking fine when it comes to a civil suit regarding children's privacy. There was some sort of record broken in the amount that this fine was. But when it's just a small percentage of a company's overall revenue, and they view it, like you said, Michael, as they may view it perhaps as a cost of doing business, I wonder how effective something like this will be if the outcome is just, well, you get fined. Maybe not that much.
Yeah. So I've talked to some consultants who've said, like, kind of and no company will go on the record as saying, we're going to violate the law, we'll just pay the fine.
Yeah,
What
that's
do
not
we
a good
care?
look.
It doesn't look good. But there is that sense of, well, we'll drag our feet. We'll do it on our own schedule. We've got complex technology to straighten out, blah, 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 and drag their feet for a while. And for some time, that strategy might work, especially for mid-sized companies or for companies with very deep pockets who make a lot of money from this and who don't want to lose those revenues right away. They will drag this stuff out. As their behavior gets more egregious, it's going to become increasingly more problematic. So this is a very risky bet to make.
Sure.
Especially if you can't afford it, because the size of the fines for many companies, this is an extinction level event.
Okay. And similar on that same sort of point that you were making is that, companies make a lot of money from selling my data and selling me ads. So
I think Google makes 85% of its income from violating your privacy.
So that's a lot of money. My question is, if I all of a sudden say, okay, Google, don't sell my data, I don't want you to, how's that going to affect their business?
Well, it's going to affect their business quite a bit, which is why they're scrambling right now to get the law changed. So there have been a series of news articles coming out in the last couple of days. The legislative session ends on September 13th. They only have a couple of days to get a bill amendments on the table and get them voted on in California to try to get the bill, eased back a little bit. They really want to be able to show you targeted ads even if you opt out. They really want to be able to share your information even if you opt out. And so they're trying really hard to get that into the legislation. As of right now, they haven't been able to get anybody to sponsor it. Obviously, no politician wants to go on the record as saying, yeah, we'll sell out your privacy, we don't care. Given the amount of huge support right now there is in the public for privacy and the constant stream of bad news about privacy violations by all the major tech companies.
Yeah, that's tough. I think it'll be. I'm actually really interested to see how this plays out. I think it'll. I wonder how much business models will have to shift. It's tough. I'm kind of wondering, where do we go from here? Where are enterprises going from here? I mean, the law goes into effect, like you said, the beginning of 2020, which is really just, what is it, September? 4 months away? 3? I don't know.
So you have to make sure that your core business model does not discriminate based on your customer's privacy status. So if you're a magazine and your primary business is giving out information, you have to be really careful about restricting that access only to people who sign up for everything. If you're a search engine and your primary business model is offering search, you have to worry really carefully about, are you restricting those features of the search just to people who give you their information? If you provide email services, are you restricting any of that? Now, right now, Google is pretty much on the safe side for a lot of it, but there's a lot of companies whose business model is based on, you give us your personal information and we'll give you stuff. And that stuff that they give you is core to what they do, but that does not, strictly speaking, require your personal information in order to be able to do it. So you can bribe people into giving you their information, but you can't punish them for not giving it to you. And that's going to be worked out in the courts. But this is something that every company should be thinking about if their business model has a big substantial part that's dependent on having and using people's private information.
Okay. Yeah, so so that's the goal for enterprises. They need to be taking a hard look at not discriminating against people who don't want their data shared. So that's obviously something that a lot of enterprises, I'm sure, are, or if they're not, should be thinking about right now. But you mentioned this right at the beginning, is that when this law goes into effect, let's say January 1, the beginning of 2020, I feel as though this is not a ton of time for businesses to become compliant. So do you think that they're going to have some sort of, we're working hard, we're doing our best to comply?
Yeah,
Okay,
when GDPR
okay.
went into effect, a large very large percentage of the companies were not fully compliant.
They still are.
They still aren't, yeah. The California law was first passed a year ago, so companies had a year and a half really to do this.
Okay.
And the first thing they should have been doing is make sure they know where their data is. And it might seem weird to think this, but most companies do not know where all the private data they collect is. So for example, if you have a PR person in your company or a marketing person putting together a spreadsheet of potential customers, sharing it with other people on Google Drive or Box or OneDrop, that's a violation of privacy. And if that customer now wants all their data deleted, you're going to have to track all that down. And most companies literally do not know all the places where data is, where all the backups are, where all the offline storage things is from like however many years ago. We had one recent breach that was based on old stored data that people forgot that they had stored. That's still breachable, sensitive data. Some things don't change, like social security numbers, dates of births. That information is always good. So companies have to figure out where all this is. For the majority of companies, from the surveys that I've seen, they do this manually. They will go to their employees, their business managers, their technology managers, and say, hey, where do you keep your data? Where are your servers? Where are your databases? Give me a list. And when you ask people that, they forget most of the stuff. Maybe they haven't accessed something in a year. Maybe it was set up before they got their job. Maybe they just didn't think about it. And these kind of audits are done like once a year. Some companies like hardly ever do them. And so this information is almost immediately out of date. It doesn't involve all those weird file sharing, the cloud storage, the Amazon buckets, all the new stuff that's happening out there right now that's done often outside of IT control. So that's going to be the biggest challenge. Just the first question is, where's the data? What data do we actually have?
Okay.
If a company does not have a good data governance program or plan, then they need to start one now.
Got it. So that's really what the next step should be for companies if they haven't already started acting towards compliance. Got it. Well, thank you guys so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. I think this is quite interesting. I'm a little interested to see how it shakes out just as a consumer. Maybe it's something I don't want to know where my data's been. So yeah, thank you guys so much. And thank you all for watching this episode of Tech Talk. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. And leave a comment below. Are you someone who's going to now go to these big tech companies and ask for your data? I want to know. Maybe I'm a little afraid to know. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.